And good evening everyone, welcome to this very special edition of Sports File. Now recently Laurie Toole from Cycling Southland has received the B&Z Badge of Gold, which is in recognition for outstanding contribution to sport. We all know what a great job he's done at the grassroots level of cycling in this province. Now part of the prize is he gets to use the services of Sir Richard Hadlee, of course New Zealand's finest all-round cricketer, for 4 hours, and part of that 4 hours he's given to me, so we can find out a little bit more about the Badge of Gold and a lot more about the cricket scene from Sir Richard, who joins me in the studio. Good evening to you.
Evening.
Let's talk about the Badge of Gold scheme. It's a tremendous thing. It's been going for a couple of years now.
Yes, it has, 2 years. Wonderful initiative from the Bank of New Zealand, and personally I have an involvement with it in the sense that there are 37 presentations a year to do all around the country, and the fact that we're in our second year now, I've probably been involved in about 50 or 60 of those presentations. Great for the community where you go into around the country, and obviously to recognise what we call the unsung heroes. And people use events differently, and with Laurie's situation we have an opportunity to talk to coaches and young athletes about sports psychology preparation, have a bit of fun as well. And other people have used me as quiz master for quiz nights and coaching in schools, all sorts of things. So, you know, to recognise those unsung heroes, the Bank of New Zealand's proud to be involved with that.
That's the wonderful thing. It's not for the elite athlete, is it? It's for the person who's perhaps ground away like Laurie has for 40 years at least, and then now getting recognised.
Well, that's right, and invariably it's people behind the scenes, those that don't like to be pushed in front of their peers. The fact that they've made a significant contribution to help an individual, a team or a club or organisation, and those people should be recognised and honoured, and we've done that, and we'll do so in the future. And
you had a chance to visit Laurie in the setup at Cycling Southland. Impressed?
Yes, had a look at the indoor situation there with the way it's set up with all the bikes and some of the little skills they can do for the kids, and it was a bit too cold to actually do the outdoor cycle trip, but we understand there's a tremendous vision that hopefully will happen in the next couple of years, and that's to have an indoor track cycle which will be associated with many other sports here in Southland, and hopefully that dream will be fulfilled for Laurie and all those associated with cycling Southland.
And your second trip in a short period of time. Last week you were down here to award another award.
Well, it was, and that was to Bob Pearcey actually from the Southend United Football Club, and he chose to use me on that occasion to be the quiz master for a sports night. And Bob was telling me that we are in fact related. And would you believe that Brian McKechnie, of course a great stalwart here from Southland, is also related to myself, so distant I must say. And of course Brian McKechnie is part of the New Zealand Cricket Selection Panel, and myself as chairman, we work very closely together these days.
I think I claim to be a relative for much of my cricket career just to try and get in a team.
We haven't got time to explain that.
No, we don't. The truth, there's no connection. I do want to talk about cricket because it's a great opportunity as chairman-elect. I'm just thinking, it's been a bit, since your retirement as a player, has it been a better period for the team, the top team at this very time, in terms of consistency of performance?
Well, I've been out of the playing side for some 12 years. I've been involved now in selection for just over 2.5 years. I think in the 90s, generally, we were competitive. But I think even since I've been involved in the last couple of years, we're still very, very inconsistent. And I think public perception will be, yes, we do have a competitive New Zealand cricket side, and we do in test matches and in one-day cricket. But our lack of consistency, both individually and collectively, is still an area of concern for us. We're rated third on the Test international panel ratings at the moment, which is great. It's the highest we've ever been. But unfortunately in the one-day game, which is important to us at the moment because the World Cup in South Africa crops up in February, March of next year, that currently we're only winning 36% of our one-day internationals. And quite frankly, that rating, or percentage rather, is far too low. If we're looking to compete and win a World Cup, we have to win 7 out of 7. And we haven't done that since 1992. So there's an area of improvement. Yes, we are competitive, and if everyone's fit and well, we'll have a very, very good side. But there are some areas of concern about just winning key matches when it matters.
We'll break that down a little bit in a moment. But in terms of test rating, third place, do you think that's a fair reflection of where we stand? Because that's quite prestigious.
Very prestigious. As I say, it's the best we've ever been. I think we play a good brand of cricket, attacking cricket, positive cricket, and I think entertaining cricket. We do have some match winners now with 1 or 2 new faces coming into the side, like Shane Bond, for example, has been a great revelation. And if you're taking wickets, and he's able to do that, and there are some very, very good other wicket-taking bowlers in the side, the fact that we can get teams out gives yourself a chance of winning, because in theory you've got to get 20 wickets. And with one or two batsmen too, who are averaging mid-high 30s, the odd one in their 40s, and someone like Mark Richardson, who's been again a revelation 50s. At the top of the order, 50. Boy, as I say, you're competitive, and on our day we can take on anyone. But the point is, we win one well, and then we lose two or three badly. So this is where the lack of consistency comes in areas that we need to address.
One major change from your playing days is we're playing a lot more international cricket, both one-day and test matches. It's like a constant calendar. So exposure to the top level of performances, we're not short of that.
Yeah, a lot of test matches, a lot of one-day games. In fact, the players are probably complaining there's too much cricket. I guess the answer to that is play less, take a pay cut. But then the players would probably want to say, okay, well, perhaps there is enough cricket. Yeah, I suppose the more you play, perhaps the better you become. But one of another big problem areas is, of course, the injuries that we have, particularly to our bowlers. But you know, it does create opportunity for other players to come into the side and do things. From our point of view, though, with all the cricket that's being played, and at times some players are unavailable, as one or two are for the Champions Trophy in Sri Lanka coming up in September. It does give us the opportunity to try one or two new players. But at the moment, we would have seriously probably a good 20, 22 players that we're looking at, and 22, quite frankly, doesn't go into 14. So therefore there's competition again for places. So that creates a little more depth for us, and makes the players just a little bit hungrier too to do the work and eventually gain selection.
Have we ever got the depth to have two almost separate teams for one day, and there's a lot of crossover, one day and test matches? I mean, that's probably in a pool talent of our size a bit too much to ask, isn't it?
Well, we're probably doing that now. We do have a specialist test and one day side. For example, Mark Richardson, Robbie Hart, Chris Martin, we consider to be specialist test players, and at this stage don't get a look in the one day side. And then in the one-day game, up until recently, then Scott Starris was considered a specialist one-day player, but has moved into the test match arena. Chris Harris we considered as a specialist one-day player, but again has played some test cricket. So, you know, things at the moment, players want to play both because it's in their interest to do so, but different skill mix, different attitude, different training routines are required to be involved in both. And it's a tough game, because really what we're looking at, particularly in the one-day game, is more multi-skilled cricketers, those that can do both bat and bowl, or bat and bowl, and certainly got to field well. Whereas in the test game, perhaps you look for more specialist out-and-out strike bowlers, specialist top order batsmen with one, maybe two all-rounders.
Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll be back with Sir Richard Hadlee, the B&Z ambassador, right after this. And welcome back to our Sports Files special featuring B&Z ambassador Sir Richard Hadlee, of course, chairman of the selectors and the great cricketing entity in its own right. And I do want to talk about some individuals in the team at the moment. I was very privileged to be at Lancaster Park this year to watch Nathan Astle in his 222, which is by far and away the finest I've witnessed. You've seen a lot more cricket than I. Have you seen anything like it to match it in terms of dominance of a bowling attack?
No, I haven't, and to see him score a double hundred and nearly win the game was an outstanding performance, particularly when we're in a near hopeless situation. Another hour of Nathan Astle, we might have done something that's never been done in the history of the game, and that's score over 500 to win a test match. But I suppose when I look back at my own career and you look at other people's careers, you look to strive for perhaps the most perfect performance without even reaching it. And I think in Nathan Astle's case, that was probably perfection personified. And he said himself that he was in the zone, and he just can't explain when you're in the zone. It's just sort of something.
Or how to get there.
Yeah, it just happens. And once you're in that zone, you know, the cricket ball, for example, is as big as a football, and everything you do comes off, and you tend to be dominant, and you ride the emotion and part of the situation you're in, and a great privilege to see it, be part of it, and if it's repeated, then that would probably be a dream.
It would be. It made me stop and think that some of our players today are really going to stand up in the annals of time as some of our greats. Nathan Astle won. He'll end up with a good test average. He's made a huge contribution. Is it fair to say he does match up with some of our past great battings?
Yes, well, you can look at cold statistics, and he would average something like 36, 37 in the test match arena, probably 33, 34 in the one-day game, and those statistics by New Zealand standards certainly are very good. By world standard, you might look back over a career and say, well, maybe I could have done better. But he certainly in the 90s, right through to the current time, has been our most outstanding batsman, and when you talk of consistency, probably has been. Nathan can win us a game, more so in the one-day game. I think he scored something like 11 or 12 one-day hundreds. Stand corrected on that, and some test hundreds and some double hundred now. Exciting to watch. Uncomplicated, likes to strike the ball, can turn a match, can win a match, and great to watch.
Touch on another player. You mentioned him earlier, Shane Bond, his meteoric rise from the public's point of view. He can genuinely bowl very fast indeed, right with the best. What's the difference between bowling 135k and bowling 145k? How's that difference achieved?
Well, he's become fitter, for one. I mean, he's had a history of injury, back problems, stress fractures, and has been out of the game and went into the police force. And when you go into the police force, you train. And I guess you get physically bigger and stronger, you prepare better. And even when he was introduced to international cricket, technically not quite as efficient as he should be. And then he suffered a stress fracture of the foot, and he's had to remodel his action and come back, and he's worked very, very hard with the technical skills advisor. He looks more efficient, and even in the West Indies, he was timed at 153 kilometres. So he's up there with the Brett Lees and Shoaib Akhtars. And from New Zealand's point of view, we haven't had that. Probably never in our history have we had somebody around that pace. And that just gives Stephen Fleming another attacking or potent option to work with, where you can bring him back at any time to perhaps break a partnership, get 2 or 3 wickets, change the course of the match and perhaps win it. And he did that in the West Indies, actually, when we won that first Test match over there to help us win that Test series. So he's a player that we have to really look after, and we can't afford to burn him out by playing in every one-day game, every Test match, because really we want 5 years out of him. If we've got him doing what he's doing, we have a young player like Ian Butler who's progressing very well for us, and again a great find for us. The Butler-Bond combination over the next few years I think is quite exciting.
With Shane Bond, one thing that impresses me is his attitude. No histrionics, no flamboyance. He's just there to do a job.
And enjoying it too. Yeah. And you can just see when he gets a wicket, he goes with it, and there's a smile on his face. Again, uncomplicated. And that's a sign of maturity as well, because he's 27 years of age, probably a late starter, you would say. But he's been through the New Zealand Cricket Academy system, so he's one of the products of the system, if you like. And he's been through the highs and lows. And he was part of the first intake probably 6 years ago. So over that 6-7 year period to where he is now, I think he knows how to handle things, so he's mature, and I think that accounts for a lot.
Would you call yourself, as a selector, a risk taker? Because I look at someone like Ian Butler, played one game, and have a Test match. Also in that Nathan Astor, I think that's where the debut was, wasn't it? But that was a risk.
Huge risk. And when we picked Ian Butler, people were saying, Ian who? And the fact that we'd lost Shane Bond, what we wanted to do was, pick apples with apples, and that, Ian Butler put himself in a slightly different category than many other bowlers who are generally medium pacers. That Ian Butler had a little bit of pace, he was aggressive with it, young, and so we took a calculated risk, and we're very pleased with his attitude, the progress that he's making. We've left him out of the one-day side to go to Sri Lanka, problems with no balling, and maybe too expensive too, but having said that, he knows his problems, he knows what he's got to get right. But at this stage, perhaps we see him more in the longer version of the game, the Test match game, but boy, he's another great asset.
Obviously, with your pedigree, are you taking a hands-on approach with any of their coaching? Are you spending any one-on-one time with the fast bowlers? Not
unless there's a direction from the coach, who's Dennis Aberhart, who's also a current selector. If he wishes to have me involved in those situations, happy to do so. You've got to know the boundaries, and as a selector there is a key role, there's a coach who has a key role, so if and when the time is right to be involved, and under Steve Rickson and Dave Trist in the past, yes, I have had an involvement. At the moment with Dennis, I'm sure that if he wants to use me, then that facility is available.
What area of the team, if you had your choice, would you like to bolster in terms of, is it the spin bowling berths, is it the backup wicket keeping? Which area comes to mind?
Two key areas. Lack of spin bowling. Daniel Vettori, without doubt, is our number one. Although he has been struggling, I'd have to say, not only with fitness, but also with a little bit of form. But he out and out is our number one spin bowler. And we've looked at sort of 3 or 4 other options. We've tried the Matthew Harts, the Brooke Walkers, the Glenn Saltzbergers and Grant Bradburns and these players, and there's a gulf between the level that they're at and the level that we need to have our second spin bowler, which is international class. So that needs to be addressed, and coincidentally we're having a meeting with all the provincial coaches this week to look at that. Yes, now that Adam Perori is gone and been in that role for 10 or 12 years and done a fantastic job for us as our number 1 keeper, Robbie Hart has stepped into that breach now, into the test game, and made a very good fist of it. So, and he's 27, 28 years of age, so he's got some years left in us. As far as the one-day game is concerned, is it Chris Niven, is it Lou Vincent, is it Brendan McCullum? So they're questions for us that we need to find answers to, but behind them there need to be others to be pushing the current players to retain their positions.
And Hart did the job with the bat too, didn't he? Didn't he?
Well, that was one of the priorities for us, not just to be a wicket keeper, but if you're batting at 7 or 8 for us, we need to get some runs out of you. It's not a question of how many, really, it's a question of how long you can bat, so that you're there in a supporting role. And he helped Scott Styris get through to his maiden Test 100, and he batted time, he batted balls, and he did exactly what was required. So obviously we're thrilled with what he did as a novice international.
All right, one more break, one more session with Sir Richard Hadlee. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show, the Sports File Special featuring Sir Richard Hadlee. Of course, captured 431 Test wickets, an average of just over 22, and batted an average of 27 as well at Test level. But here is the BNZ ambassador in Southland. Welcome back to the show, Sir Richard. I want to talk about a little bit about your career, a couple of items which aren't talked about much, and that's World Series cricket. You were the only New Zealander that took part in the rebellious times. At that time, did you think the game would ever repair, that it would ever come back together? Because it was fragmented, wasn't it? Terribly.
World Series cricket was a difficult time in the history of cricket. The fact that you had anti-establishment players playing in their own separate group as against playing the normal type of cricket with the blessing of all the international countries. I should point out though that when I played World Series cricket, I played here in New Zealand only, and I was an invited guest, so I wasn't part of a contracted rebel World Series group, and I had the full support of New Zealand cricket, which was contrary to what
everyone else was in.
Yeah, so you know, I played as a guest, and coincidentally I was actually player of the series for the 5 or 6 games that were played here. So that was a great thrill for me, knowing that I could compete with you know, a hard core of great players in world cricket. But fortunately today things have settled down, and many of the things that came out of World Series cricket have been adopted by the governing body now, such as you know, the day-night cricket as we see in coloured gear and white balls, black sight screens, and just the hype of the game. So whilst World Series cricket was detrimental at the time and caused a lot of problems, the good thing that came out of it was, you know, the change of game that we saw, and of course player payments. It was a huge factor that players now are now being rewarded for the skills and abilities that they have, and in some cases earning hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Also, just talking about making a career, there was a spell at Tasmania, wasn't there, for one season, which I don't know much about. Was that a useful part of your build-up? Because I know Nottingham was the key part.
Yeah, well, I had 10 years at Nottingham, and the fact that I played county cricket for that period really fine-tuned me as a cricketer, because you're playing 6 days a week. And I've always believed that you know, the great test of any sports person, and relating it to cricket, is that okay to perform in your own conditions in front of your own crowd, knowing the pitches and those sorts of things, and you develop, I guess, a reputation for that. But the true test is in fact to perform on foreign soil when the conditions are against you, the crowds, the pitches, the heat, humidity, say of India or Pakistan. And so the time to play in Australia in the Sheffield Shield competition, that opportunity came about. I think it's fair to say that the Sheffield Shield competition at the time was, as it probably is today, is probably the toughest provincial state type competition in world cricket, probably more so than county cricket, because we know how the Australians play their sport, and boy, to be able to compete in that environment was important. So I had sort of 4 or 5 months playing with Tasmania, and Tasmania at that stage was a fledgling state team, probably intimidated by the big boys on the mainland in Australia, but you know, I played with the likes of David Boone, and David Boone was a 16-year-old that burst onto the scene in first-class cricket, and of course went on to be a batsman that scored over 8,000 test runs for Australia. So to see him as a 16-year-old and then play against him as like a 21-year-old, you know, was a great experience.
Well, going back to the English county scene, is it still a good breeding ground for New Zealanders to aspire to? There's not quite so much time available to perhaps spend in the counties as there was a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. At the time that I played, and that was 78 through to 87, we had two overseas players at Nottinghamshire, Clive Rice, the South African, being the other. And that made it a pretty good competition because you're playing with and against probably 30 international world-class players in that environment. So competition was very, very good. Today, it was difficult for New Zealand players to get into county cricket because, one, of the international calendar and being available for your own country, and secondly, there was a restriction of one overseas player per county, and invariably the counties would look for the superstars, the match winners, and New Zealand, quite frankly, didn't have many, even though Chris Cairns had a bit of a time at Nottingham. Nathan Astle had a few weeks or months at Nottingham, but it was just difficult to get involved in. Today, though, the situation has gone a step further where instead of having one overseas county player, and because the international calendar is so tough that counties can use 3, 4 or 5 international players, not all at one time, but they can have a player for like 2 months and then another player for 2 months and another player. And that sort of happened like Shane Bond, for example.
Got an opportunity, isn't
yeah,
it?
I mean, Warwickshire he's playing for. They've had the services of Sean Pollock, the great South African, for a period of time. Pollock's involved in a series somewhere else around the world. Window of opportunity for Shane Bond to go over there for about a 4-week period. So, you know, situations keep changing, and quite frankly, I think for Shane Bond, I think it'd be a good opportunity for him to hone in again on his skills and make him a better player.
Just looking at the international scene overall, cricket survived the controversy of match fixing quite well, hasn't it? It's come through that without too much damage.
Well, no damage as far as New Zealand is concerned, but it was perhaps the greatest crisis that the game's ever suffered. And the game's been through some tough times, underarm, body line, World Series cricket, all controversial, all happened in Australia, should I point out. But, you know, match fixing was a terrible thing. But the point is it was exposed, it was highlighted, penalties were imposed, and players now know exactly what's going to happen if there's any suggestion of being involved in it. I don't think we'll ever do away with betting. I mean, it happens in other sports, but the point is you've got to keep the players out of it, and even third parties involved with the players. It's got to be totally sorted out, and players made example of if they cross the line.
And perhaps now the biggest threat to the game, if there is a threat, is the volatile nature of some of the host nations, isn't it? The likes of Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, where people just don't want to go and tour anymore.
Yeah, Pakistan I think is a real problem. Sri Lanka not so much, even though we've had 3 players declare their unavailability for this tour coming up in Sri Lanka. Yeah, they're all issues that it's a day-by-day thing, and I think you've got to respect player choices as well. And from a selectorial point of view, if a player is unavailable, we can only deal with real situations, therefore we pick somebody else. And with Craig McMillan being unavailable for the Champions Trophy in South Africa, in Sri Lanka rather, there's an opportunity for Matthew Sinclair to re-establish his career. So whilst there's a negative, we tend to look more for the positives.
Has there been a time since you've been chairman of the selections you've had your first choice team and been able to pick them?
Well, we actually did that in a test match, actually, I think against Bangladesh, where we had the same playing 11 on the field in consecutive games. Other than that, in a 2-year period, I don't think we've put the same team on the field to play. Not in a test match. One-day games, I stand corrected, but we may have had the same teams on the field.
All the teams, they had to be Bangladesh, didn't it? You could have had any other opposition.
Well, see, I think once we get people like Chris Cairns and Andre Adams, Shane O'Connor, they're the 3 injured players really that are out of action. And at the moment, Cairns is making good progress. He's ahead of schedule. Shane O'Connor, we see perhaps more in the longer version of the game, although we won't discount the one-day game for him. And Andre Adams as an impact player in the one-day game, certainly. Boy, if everyone is fit and we've got the 20 to choose from, boy, we're going to have a very good side.
And for the World Cup forthcoming, you're confident about Cairns and Adams because they're critical members of
Yes, I think we'll be okay with them. We'll take the optimistic view. The World Cup is important for us. From a selectorial point of view, we've been working 2.5 years for getting the team right to go to South Africa and having the options available, the combinations. We've never won a World Cup. We've been in 4 previous World Cup semi-finals, 2 previous World Cup quarter-finals. We are so close to getting there, and I'm not suggesting for one minute we're going to win it, but boy, if we've got the right players available, we should be competitive. At the very least, we want to make the final, and on the day you can win it.
Okay, Sir Richard Hadlee. There was one interesting fact about your history I read with interest some time ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your first ever wicket for New Zealand was Trevor Chappell. Is that correct? Against a state match?
Yeah, it was the first
class
yes,
wicket for New
yes, that's
Zealand.
right. Well, I was going back to about 1973 now, so it was the first wicket for New Zealand. State game first class match. First test wicket was Asif Iqbal, yes, Pakistan, 1972.
Just a wee point of interest. Sir Richard Hadlee, thank you very much for joining us and for bestowing the badge of honour on Laurie Toole. Thanks very much for Cycling South, and too for allowing Sir Richard to spend some time on this program. That's all from us. We'll see you in a future edition of the program. Good night.